Okay, now I know some of y'all are new around here. So let's talk about some books so you can get to know me. What up, Search fam? Sade here. Welcome or welcome back to the channel. If you are new, my name is Sade and I'm out here curating and co-creating a cool ass life, which means from time to time, pretty regularly these days, I am talking to you all in front of my couch about books. Now, whether this is your first time coming across my little corner of the internet or you keep coming back and have not subscribed, might I invite you to become part of my internet family so that you can see what I be up to. Hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell so you're made aware of every time I post, which is usually on the weekends. All right, my lovelies. We're going to do a little thing I've seen. I saw it going around a couple months ago. Well, obviously we know that when you don't have the spoons, the knives, or the forks to do things, sometimes you do things a little late. But I'm right on time for me, and that's fine too. So I'm going to give you all 10 books to get to know me. And I'll talk about them a little bit. I'm not going to give you so much of a synopsis of these books. Rather, I'm going to tell you about them as it relates to what you need to know about me, especially if you're sticking around. Okay. Now, the first book is, I don't have my physical copy with me, but it is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. Now, this is a children's novel within the Chronicles of Narnia series. It's book 2. And I was probably first read this book in maybe the 2nd or 3rd grade, and immediately, maybe earlier than that, but immediately I loved it. So much so that when I used to go to the library with my mom, especially the downtown library, I would always get the BBC videos of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe frequently. I watched it over and over and over. And so it is still one of my favorite children's books, and I love it. I don't think I might have read 1 or 2, maybe 1 more out of the entire series, but I've never actually finished the Chronicles of Narnia series, but The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe really does it for me. Next, we have All About Love by Claire Khann, and I love this book because this is YA as well. But this is the first book that I read that had an asexual main character. And it was so cute and so well done, and you still get a swoony romance. So it's one of my comfort novels that I read with some regularity a few times a year, because it's just, it's the hug that you need, especially as someone who identifies on the A spectrum. So to see yourself represented in that way, even though Alice is like 19, 20 years old, and the first time I read this, I was way older than her, but I still love it to pieces. In the same vein, since we're talking about romances that make you feel seen, What If I Love You, which I read this maybe 2 years ago, but it had me in tears because the main character, Renee, is autistic and high functioning, and she's like the CEO of a company, and like so many things that she has to deal with as a Black woman in the tech space who's also autistic, and people don't know that she's autistic, so she's like high masking as well. And also seeing a character like that be the center of a love story, when I tell you, in tears. Like if I need a good cry in romance, I probably pick up What If I Love You. Next is, because there are, obviously, because I'm an academic books in my pile, but one is Black Womanist Ethics by Katie Cannon. And Katie Cannon was one of my mentors, and I first read her work when I was an undergraduate, is in religious studies, and discovering womanism greatly changed the trajectory of my life, especially as an intellectual, because again, I was seeing myself in work that I was reading. and people who had been thinking through and talking about and writing about things that I at 18, 19, 20 had been thinking about and pondering and struggling with as someone who grew up in a Black church that didn't or still doesn't ordain women. But I just, and also this book is probably singularly responsible for the way in which I study cultural products as source material for doing my work. Yeah, it's a big one. Also, in the same vein of academic books that really just peeled me back is Freedom Dreams by Robin D.G. Kelley. And this one is about the Black radical imagination. And this is an idea, the Black radical tradition, as well as the Black radical imagination, have been things that I've been pondering on for a few years now and starting to work through my ideas around, and about like how artists within African diaspora function and then grassroots organizations and how they continue to conceive realities within a liberatory framework, right? And so this book is one that I have gone back to a couple of times. I've only owned it for a few years, but I keep going back to it for research, but also for my own thoughts as not only an intellectual, an educator, but also someone who is in the activist space and has been for a long time, but now my activism is sort of taking a turn. This is a seminal text for me. I'm sure if you've been around at length, you're not surprised by this. But Fledgling by Octavia Butler is one of my favorite Octavia Butler novel in her canon. And it was the first book that I read that conceived vampires as Black. And I was in a space where I was looking for Black vampire novels. And this is the first one that I read. And I was just like gagged. And also like, why didn't nobody tell me about Octavia Butler, girl? Somebody did me a grave disservice that I did not start reading Butler until 2014, maybe. And she died in 2006, which meant if I had been given these tools, because I was like 17, 18 years old in 2006, I could have made my way. I could have found a way to meet Octavia Butler. I could have. So like, I'm real mad about that still, very salty. Hex and the Single Girl by Valarie Frenkle. I love this book and I read it yearly because it's a Halloween book, because it is magic and it is smart and there's puns and it's silly. And the main character, Emma, is just, she's an outcast kind of human being who's just trying to exist and live her life, but also utilizes her magical gifts in particular ways that sometimes gets her into hijinks and shenanigans. And I absolutely love this book. It's a good laugh book. This is another comfort read, but it's like a seasonal comfort read. I definitely read it almost every Halloween. Speaking of comfort reads, The Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon by Kimberly Lemming. It's absurd. And I love it as a romance, and a cozy romance at that. This really scratched the itch for me. Kimberly Lemming's sense of humor is slightly deranged, which really suits my sensibilities very well. And I just love the characters in the world. But Cinnamon is me. Like, if you ever wanted to read a book and say, what is Sade like? Cinnamon is the character that's like very me coded. Lastly are two books that both of them sort of represent me as a scholar and educator, but also parts of things that really mean a lot to me. So one is The Conjuring of America by Lindsey Stewart, and I just read this last month, and it is about hoodoo and conjure from the perspective of African American women set within the trajectory of American history. And I think it's super important because frequently when we talk about especially religious traditions, we don't talk about women as much when we talk about Black religion, especially outside of the context of the Black church. Things started to get hinky. But it's so fascinating. And there are so many things that are tied to the culture that are also deeply tied to hoodoo root work and conjure, as well as there are so many parts of this that remind me of where I grew up. It reminds me of my grandmother and the elders in my church and people that I was around frequently. And I love that because all of those things help to make me the woman that I am, right? And so I enjoyed this a lot because I not only saw a lot of myself, but I saw a lot of the people that I have known and loved in my life. Finally, if you ever wanted to know what it was like to take a class with me, Black AF History by Michael Harriot. Yep, this is gonna do it. I have been a history nerd for the longest, right? And also there is a way in which I teach my classes, being a raggedy Black millennial, that is deeply irreverent, right? Because very unserious as a human being. I could just put that out there. That is kind of what is happening with Black AF history, because Michael Harriot wrote for the Griot and is a journalist by trade. So what you get is this deep humor in the storytelling of some things that really aren't very funny, which is very par for the course for Black folks, right? And so that is something that I deeply appreciate. But also, this be me in class telling off-color jokes about white supremacy, patriarchy, and capitalism. And I think it's a fantastic book, especially if you don't know Black history very well. I think this gives you a lot of things that you're not going to get in your K through 12 education. There are many things in here that I got as someone who has done graduate work, especially in African American studies, but also as someone who reads a lot, right? I got this book to read because I like to read and I like history, and found in it a kindred spirit, right? So I hope that you enjoyed that, hearing about some books that really capture me as a human being, and that it helps you to stick around these parts because it hits a sensibility of your own. Tell me, if you had to list out a few books that reflected you as a person, what would they be? Put it down in my downstairs area or the comment section. And as always, friends, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, tell a friend to tell a friend about the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.